To other stories now, Scottish authorities say a Libyan man accused of making the bomb which destroyed Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie 34 years ago is now in the United States custody. The U.S. announced charges against Abu Aguila Masood 2 years ago, alleging he had played a key role in the bombing on the 21st of December 1988. That blast on board the Boeing 747 left 270 people dead. It's the deadliest terrorist incident to have taken place on British soil. All 259 passengers and crew on board the jumbo jet bound to New York from London died, while another 11 people were killed in Lockerbie when wreckage destroyed their homes. The U.S. had announced charges against Abu Masood 2 years ago, alleging he played a key role in the bombing on December 21st, 1988. The blast on board the Boeing 747 left 270 people dead. All 259 passengers and crew on board the jumbo jet bound to New York from London died, while another 11 people were killed in Lockerbie when wreckage destroyed their homes. Last month, it was reported that Masood had been kidnapped by a militia group in Libya, leading to speculation that he was going to be handed over to the American authorities to stand trial. Masood is expected to make an initial appearance in a federal court in Washington. 5 years ago, Masood was serving a prison sentence in Libya for bomb making. It is alleged that while in jail, he confessed to being involved in the conspiracy with Abdel Basset al-Megrahi, who was convicted of bombing Pan Am 103 after standing trial at a specially convened Scottish court in the Netherlands. He was then the only man to be convicted over the attack. A spokesperson for the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service says families of those killed in the Lockerbie bombing have been told Abu Masood is in U.S. custody and that the Scottish prosecutors and police, working with UK government and US colleagues, will continue to pursue the investigation with the aim of bringing those who acted along with al-Megrahi to justice. Let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, to shed some light upon this. Maria, Abu Aguila Masood is now in U.S. custody. What next?
You're exactly correct. He's in. It's been about a 2-year wait for the U.S. for him to be able to make it here to the U.S. We're expected to see him in a district court in Washington sometime here very soon. At this time, you can expect he's going through a myriad of questioning, some level of investigation before he even reaches the court to be able to stand there for to be able to be presented there. So I think at this time we can expect sometime in the next few days to see him appear in a district court in Washington.
And the reason he's in the U.S. is because he was once in a Scottish prison, I believe. And then before that, he was being held in Libya, reportedly escaped, I think, or was released, escaped with the other, the bomber, the one who actually, triggered the bomb on the plane that was flying over Lockerbie. Now that one is dead, what could happen to him, with this trial that is expected to happen anytime soon, as you say?
Yes, we can expect this trial is going to really look at not only the Pan Am 103, but anything else they might suspect he could be tied to as it relates to bombing. As we know, a lot of times the terrorist issues that exist in the U.S. has been monitoring several for the last 20 to 25 years. Have connections. And so I think what is going to be done at this time is to ensure there are no connections to any other terror attacks that have occurred that have involved the U.S. over the past 20 to 25 years. And obviously this goes back to 1988. And then obviously to try to understand what exactly happened with that. As we know, this plane was on its way to New York. And so that is obviously of great concern to the United States. And so that's where they're going to begin their investigation and to see if he's going to have to serve any time here in the U.S.
You just answered a question I was going to ask, which is to walk us through, why and how his arrest is so important to the United States. Well, that flight was headed to the U.S., where they confirmed American citizens on the plane, which is why the U.S. government is really interested, in Masood's trial.
Yes, and so I think that is where we're, as you said, Americans are always going to be the number one priority for the United States government. And so that's kind of where we stand with that, but also understanding that American citizens are throughout the world and oftentimes are impacted by terrorist attacks that don't just happen on American soil. And so this is a way, and as we know, the U.S. has come out, since the Biden administration has come out and said they have a stronghold and they are going to deal with terror, and they are going to take a very aggressive approach on terror. We're just coming out of the Brittany Griner and the prisoner swap that occurred, and so many people are asking, is the U.S. really heavy on terror? Is the U.S. really going to be able to keep those war criminals and those who have been imprisoned, or are they weakened? And so I think this is another stamp on the U.S. to say, no, we do take terror very seriously. We do take our prisoners very seriously, and we are going to bring them to trial. And so, as we know, this does go back 2 years, but the timing of when he will be brought to trial, I think, is no coincidence.
I think that's a legitimate concern, Maria, the issue of whether the U.S. does take terrorism seriously. I mean, we've seen cases of domestic terrorism that the U.S. apparently sort of treats with kids' gloves. Then imagine you an international case like this. But clearly the Scottish government is also interested in Masood's case. The investigators will continue to work, with other international partners to make sure, that everything that needs to be found out in this in the bombing in 1988 is found. But could he be returned to serve time in Scotland, where, when his trial is done, being that the atrocity was actually committed over British soil?
Well, we know that negotiation agreements are going to be happening. We can guarantee that. If he is convicted of a crime here in the United States, that will be, I think, a considerable point of contention for the U.S. to be able to negotiate with Scotland if they do want to bring him back to Scotland to serve time. I do foresee that if there is any type of trial that occurs and that if he's convicted, that we will at least see him for a little bit of time here in the U.S. in prison, even if there is some agreement made to carry out the remainder of his time in Scotland. But this will be definitely one of those global and international relation negotiations for the U.S.
So Masood is Libyan, right? So that would also entail that the U.S. government might be reaching out to Libya. But unfortunately, there is no legitimate government in Libya as we speak. So the U.S. has no one over there to reach out to, for any information about Masood's operations. And, the sect or the group that he belonged to are the ones that masterminded this bombing. But that part of the investigation, will the U.S. government also be taking that seriously, or will that be set aside because of the current situation politically in Libya?
We can probably be quite assured that over the last 2 years, the intelligence community has been very much engaged with the U.S. government, collecting information on his time in Libya, on some of the past offenses, understanding really what has occurred with him, even from the last 34 years since the bombing in 1988. So I think a lot of that has already been done with the intelligence community, but it will continue. The deep standing relationships that the U.S. has across the world, and especially with the private investigation and intelligence community, will provide them with additional details, despite the fact that maybe the Libyan government won't be able to provide the type of intel that they're looking for.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for keeping your ears and eyes on the ground for us. Welcome back to the program. 2 police officers and a member of the public have been shot dead at a remote property in Queensland, Australia. The officers were responding to reports of a missing person in Wimbilla, 270 kilometres west of Brisbane. Police at a news conference say the offenders are still at large and residents are being told to remain indoors until further notice. Katarina Carroll, Queensland Police Commissioner, said 4 police officers attended the property. There was also another shooting, this time in Italy, where 3 women were killed in a rare incident in Rome. The victims include a friend of the new prime minister, who were killed when a man opened fire at a cafe, injuring 4 other people. Those inside were meeting as part of a local bloc's residents committee. Roberto Guttieri, the mayor of Rome, described the shooting as a grave episode of violence. Reports say a 57-year-old suspect is now in custody. He's had a history of disputes with some of the committee's board. The VOA's Sabina Castelfranco joins us now. She's in Rome. Sabina, thanks for making time to be with us. And I'm sure that this incident may have rattled the rest of Italy, Rome especially, where, you don't hear much of these sort of incidents. So how are the people reacting to this?
Well, people are rather shocked that somebody can just, take out a gun and start shooting in broad daylight. Certainly, these are not incidents that are very frequent at all in Rome. People are quite shocked with what happened. I mean, literally, this is a man who managed to walk away from a shooting range with a gun, and then he walked into this meeting that was being held in an enclosed area of a local cafe in the north of Rome. And he just said, I'm going to shoot you all, and started shooting like crazy. And so fortunately, other members of the board meeting were able to stop him. But obviously, he had done enough damage. He had shot dead 3 people, 3 women. Not only that, but he also injured 4 others. One of them is in very serious condition. So they managed to stop him. And then the police arrived and took him into custody, as you said.
So did people even know what was going on, while the shooting was taking place? Were there immediate reactions, to the shooting? Because it seemed they had enough time, to carry out this atrocity before the police arrived. Yeah, we're having challenges.
Yes, well, it happened,
Right.
Everybody noticed or said. I think we had a freeze. Maybe you can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Sabina. Thanks a lot. The connection is acting up today, but please go on.
But yes, people realized immediately, because he very loudly, as he came into the cafe, said, I'm going to shoot you all, and took out the gun. So yes, they immediately realized that this man was not joking or anything of the kind. Also, he had already had a run of issues with members of this board meeting of the building, because apparently there was some dispute that they wanted him out of his lodgings. So he had already even had issues and had been reported to the police for his behavior. So they immediately realized this was going to be someone who was going to act very violently.
Is it normal for people to carry guns in Rome? I mean, in Italy in general. What are the gun laws there? What do they say?
No, it's absolutely not normal at all. You need to have a license to carry a gun. It's very rare, in fact, for people to be carrying guns. This is certainly very far from the United States, where the situation is quite different. People do not carry guns, and people are shocked by the fact that he was able to take this gun from a shooting range and just walk out of this shooting range. I mean, how is it possible that nobody noticed that he was doing this? This is something that has seriously concerned public opinion in this country.
Yes, and I'm just wondering, they have him in custody right now. Has the police said anything about what they're learning about this case? I know investigations are still going on, Sabina, but are the police letting anything on, as regards what has happened in the last few hours, especially regarding either the victims or the man himself?
Well, we know that the victims are 3 women. We know about the man, he's a 57-year-old. We know he had issues with the condominium because they wanted him out of his lodgings. We know all these things, and we also know that he will not be let out of prison until a decision is made, because they are scared that he may flee. So he will be kept in custody until some sort of decision is taken as to how long he will need to be in prison, whether that be with a proper court case, and that could take a very long time, as it does in this country. There are 3 degrees of justice in this country. There's a first degree, then, a decision by the courts can be appealed, and then there is also the High Court. But there's little chance, as people see it at the moment here, that this man will be allowed out of prison until, any time before the trial takes place, because he has shot 3 people. He was carrying a gun that he shouldn't have been carrying, and this is being regarded as premeditated murder.
One of the victims is a friend of the new prime minister. Has she said anything about this incident?
Yes, she paid tribute to the victims. She was a friend of Giorgia Meloni, our new and first woman prime minister in this country. And Giorgia Meloni posted a picture of herself alongside her friend, whose name is Nicoletta Golisano. She was one of the 3 victims. She posted a photo on Instagram on Sunday evening, in fact, and said, and wrote, "For me, she will always be beautiful and happy like this." That's what the Prime Minister wrote alongside the photograph. And as you were saying before, the Rome mayor, called this a very grave episode of violence that has struck our city, and he called an emergency security meeting for today.
Sabina, thanks for feeding us up and bringing us up to speed on this story. And do stay safe in Rome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're still in Europe. 4 people have been charged in an investigation into suspected bribery at the European Parliament by Gulf states, reportedly Qatar. A Greek member of Parliament and European Parliament Vice President Eva Kaili is among those previously arrested in the case. Prosecutors suspect the Gulf state tried to influence Parliament with donations of money or gifts. Local media have reported that the accused country is Qatar, which the Qatari government has denied. Watchdogs and opposition MEPs have said it could be one of the biggest corruption scandals the European Parliament has ever seen. Meanwhile, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the allegations of corruption against the Vice President of the European Parliament are of the utmost concern. She told reporters the situation is very serious, reiterating that she was also proposing the creation of an independent ethics board to cover EU institutions. Earlier today, Greece froze the assets of a key suspect in the case, that's Eva Kaili, a Vice President of the European Parliament, and one of 4 people arrested and charged in Belgium over the weekend, according to a source who's familiar with the matter.
The allegations against the Vice President of the European Parliament are of utmost concern, very serious. It is a question of confidence of people into our institutions, and this confidence and trust into our institutions needs highest standards and of independence and integrity. For us, it is very critical to have not only strong rules, but the same rules also covering all the European institutions and not to allow for any kind of exemptions. So it's a matter of transparency, it's a matter of very clear rules, and all the European institutions should abide to the same rules that we put in place. And as I said, we're checking every detail on the transparency register. We have very clear rules for all commissioners. We look into that with in view of what has happened at the European Parliament. And here we have to check how the situation is. I think as long as there are no new informations, we are at the status quo. But indeed, if any kind of new information occurs, we will have to act and react to that.
Meanwhile, the European Union foreign ministers are reviewing new sanctions on Iranian people and organizations over human rights abuses in Tehran's crackdown on protesters and the supply of drones to Russia at a meeting in Brussels today. The EU foreign ministers are also discussing the ninth package of Russia sanctions that is set to place almost 200 more individuals and entities on the EU sanctions list. But EU foreign policy chief Josep Borrell stresses there's still no agreement. He hopes that could come later today or even on Tuesday. Ministers will also aim to top up by €2 billion of fund member states have used to finance arms purchases for Kyiv, but which has largely depleted over almost 10 months of the war in Ukraine.
We are going to approve a very, very tough package of sanctions. It was not easy. It was not an easy conversation with my colleague, the foreign affairs minister in Iran, because we talk about what's happening inside the country, the supply of arms to Russia, and these two people being executed. Iran has to understand that the European Union will condemn strongly and will take any action we can in order to support Iran women, to support the peaceful demonstrators, and certainly rejection of this death penalty.
To the UK now, Britain's economy is likely to get worse before it gets better. So says the Finance Minister, Jeremy Hunt, who confirms he has a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year. His comments come after figures today showed a bounce back in growth in October, but the weakest three-month performance since early 2021. Hunt also says he does not know whether inflation had peaked or not.
Well, these figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
In the meantime, Foreign Minister James Cleverly says the UK could not afford to hang on to its comfort blanket of pre-existing friendships and alliances, but must forge new relationships, adding that the UK needs to be salespeople in convincing other countries to subscribe to its values in a persuasive way over decades, but that could take a long time to see any tangible results from the effort. Now, Peru's new president is proposing bringing the country's general elections forward by 2 years to April 2024 amid ongoing political tension. President Dina Boluarte has also declared a state of emergency in areas where protests have erupted. Earlier today, 2 teenagers were killed in clashes between demonstrators and police in the southwestern Apurimac region. Ms. Boluarte was sworn in as president on Wednesday after her predecessor, Pedro Castillo, was impeached following his attempt to dissolve Congress. In a televised address to the nation today, she said she would submit a bill to Congress to hold elections in April 2024 instead of April 2026. The move represents an about turn, as she had said upon taking office that she would serve out the remainder of Mr. Castillo's 5-year term in office in full. Iran has carried out a second execution linked to the anti-government protests engulfing the country. A court had convicted Majidrisa Ravarad of the charge of enmity against God after finding he had stabbed to death 2 members of the paramilitary Basij resistance force. The judiciary announced that he has been hanged in public in the city of Mashhad. Human rights groups have warned that protesters are being sentenced to death after sham trials with no due process. The first execution took place last Thursday, triggering international condemnation. 23-year-old Mohsen Shikari was convicted of enmity against God after being found to have attacked a Basij member with a machete in Tehran. Pakistan says at least 6 civilians have been killed, 17 others injured in an unprovoked bombing and gunfire attack on a border town by Afghan Taliban forces. Attack at Chaman on Sunday has been condemned by Pakistan's military, who say the Afghan side launched indiscriminate fire. However, Afghan security sources say the incident happened after Pakistan demanded Afghan border forces stop building a checkpost on their side of the border. In the meantime, Pakistani forces have retaliated with 1 Afghan soldier killed. It's unclear what sparked the clash of the major border crossing, but it comes amid rising tensions between the neighboring countries over security issues, since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan last year. It's that time of the year again, and delegations from African nations meet in Washington, D.C. for the joint U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, where President Joe Biden is expected to announce U.S. support for African Union's admission to the G20 as a permanent member. White House advisor Judd Devermont said Mr. Biden is expected to make the announcement during the summit, when he will meet presidents of African countries. The move comes after requests from African Union Chair and Senegalese President Macky Sall and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. South Africa is the only G20 member from Africa. The AU is made up of 55 member states. The US released a new strategy document for sub-Saharan Africa back in August, stressing the region's importance, the threats posed by China and Russia, and vowing to extend defense cooperation with like-minded African countries. Now, in November, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington would have to do things differently to help Africa with its infrastructure needs, and it was time to stop treating the continent as a subject of geopolitics and rather as a major player on its own. South Africa joined the rest of the world to mark the International Anti-Corruption Day, which is hosted by the country's Public Service Commission at the University of South Africa in Pretoria. A theme of the event was the costly failure of governance and ethics in the public service, a collective response to tackle the scourge of corruption in the public sector. Many calls are made for the protection and support of whistleblowers, whose brave actions have uncovered a lot of corrupt practices, sometimes at the risk of the loss of their jobs and lives.
Nearly 2 decades since the adoption of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the battle against corruption still rages, going down memory lane to how South Africa's constitutional democracy came to be. The chairman of the country's Public Service Commission, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, says every report on corruption so far indicate the weaknesses in the public sector.
Whilst we are still grappling with the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, pervasive corruption has now emerged as a powerful force with just the same destructive effect as colonialism and apartheid. This now is the new frontier of the struggle to once again ensure that the few do not take common goods and services so that they serve their own interests.
The heart of our responses and the key to their success are the people. The people of South Africa are South Africa's most precious resource. Young people have the most to lose, but they are the very people who have to find transformative solutions to corruption and hold leaders to account.
The leaders of the 3 arms of the South African government were invited to speak, but President Cyril Ramaphosa, who himself is working under a cloud of allegations of corruption in the Phala farm scandal, opted to attend to the call of his ruling ANC at the last minute instead. So the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, quoting from a Constitutional Court judgment, outlined the impacts of corruption on society.
This is what the court said, and I quote, "There can be no gainsaying that corruption threatens to fell at the knees virtually everything we hold dear and precious in our hard-won constitutional order. It blatantly undermines the democratic ethos, the institutions of democracy, the rule of law, and the foundational values of our nascent constitutional project."
In our families,
where the campaign must begin, going upwards organizationally, that we stop corruption dead in its tracks. You can't keep quiet when your daughter or son comes in with a fancy gadget which you didn't buy. And they are not made to account for where it comes from.
Former public protector Professor Thuli Madonsela suggested a new deal based on strengthened democratic governance, social justice, fundamental human rights, professionalizing corruption investigators, a Venice-styled commission to support Parliament, as well as the simplification of the Anti-Corruption Act, PRECA, so people will know that corruption goes beyond graft and bribery.
We need a new deal on socio-economic justice in this country. If we don't get that, we will not make progress on many issues around implementing our beautiful constitution, and it will continue to be seen by others as a Pockhampton village.
But with the old deal on ground so far, is there some progress at all?
We're actually not. 19 years after we have signed the United Nations Charter, we haven't actually won the war against corruption, and we are now here to ask ourselves what is going wrong.
I think we are winning the war against corruption. If each of us do our little bit, our own part, bit by bit, definitely we will make progress. That's my view.
Attendees read and signed the anti-corruption pledge with the hope that people would take it to heart. But a major outcome was the echoed call by all the speakers for more protection and financial support of whistleblowers, whom the South African State Capture Commission of Inquiry recommended be giving a percentage of funds recovered from proceeds of corruption. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
It's beginning to feel more Christmassy in many parts of the world, especially where there are frigid weather conditions, such as in Britain. Kids made the most of the snowy weather amid the wintry conditions that caused widespread travel disruptions across the UK. Areas of Great Britain were given a layer of snow as northerly winds and temperatures below freezing and the first cold snap of the winter season. The chilly weather is forecast to last into the new week. Meanwhile, the Buckingham Palace has released the photograph of King Charles's first Christmas card as monarch, a picture of the then heir to the throne with his wife Camilla, a Queen Consort, at the Bremer Games in Scotland. The Bremer is gathering a celebration of traditional Scottish games, sports and dancing in Bremer, a village 60 miles west of Aberdeen, which neighbours the King's Balmoral summer residence. A photo chosen by Charles and Camilla is said to have been taken on September 3rd, shortly before he came to the throne. Queen Elizabeth, who missed the event for the first time in a 70-year reign, died less than a week later. And after 3 years of pandemic lockdowns, retailers in Australia are decking their halls with Christmas decorations once more, ready to help shoppers stuff their stockings and purchase their perfect gifts. As Christmas gifts are wrapped in Sydney malls, shoppers who missed out on the Black Friday sales are spending big despite the rising inflation. One of the CEOs of Australian Retailers Association, Paul Zara, says the amount Australians spent during the Black Friday sales was a surprise to retailers. Residents say Christmas is a time to spoil family and loved ones, but doing so this year might be a little harder. And hundreds of Santas and at least one Grinch, there's always a Grinch, took to the slopes in Newry, Maine on Sunday as they practiced their technique ahead of what is expected to be a busy Christmas delivery season. Santa practicing, I guess. Wearing Santa's trademark bright red suit with white trim, more than 250 skiers, thank God, there they are, hit the slopes at the Sunday River Resort to raise money for charity. There was, of course, lots of music, laughter, ringing of the bells as the group cheerfully took to the slopes on the chilly, sunny day. Skiers had to wear full Santa suits, including a red Santa hat with white trim, a red Santa jacket and pants, and a must for all Santas, the Santa beard. A take on the River Resort Broadway Trail. Those in full costume received a lift ticket for a $25 donation to the River Fund Maine non-profit that funds educational and recreational activities for children in Western Maine. This year's event raised $7,500 for local charities, according to the Portland Press Herald. wondering what mode of transportation Santa in Nigeria may be using this year. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubadi.